Hello, it's April 2024, and a while ago I did a video that I said was very difficult for me to do, as it talked about what I would call woo-woo, sharing some experiences out in the wilderness and showing some video evidence as a descriptive that I had of one particular event. So if you're not into this type of thing, then just turn this video off and watch something else. Now this video is inspired by another video that I had watched, and I've used some of this YouTuber's content as overlays in some videos around the new year, and that had to do with the woman who freaked out on a plane. And when I had included that in some of my overlays, some people came back to me saying, why am I talking about such silly and stupid things? And I'm completely paraphrasing here. And I understand these types of videos may, in some people's personal fiction, like an opinion, may challenge my credibility, but really don't care. Now, this recent video talked about what people are seeing, and apparently there's some sort of condition based on the liberal arts theoretical pseudoscience of psychology that, this type of thing happens. And the reason why, for example, the woman who freaked out on the plane, and there was other examples, apparently they're still continuing, interest me because of something that I had shared over a decade ago. And I'm going to be getting into that in a moment. So this video talks about people seeing, according to mainstream news even, demon faces, and trying to say there's something wrong with people's eyes and so forth. Now, what I'm about to share goes far beyond that and involves someone else, I guess you can say, as a witness, but they were part of all this. And I had brought this up in an online forum, again, over a decade ago, about 2011, and talked about this experience and then introduced this individual who was part of this experience. Now, just before I get into this more in depth, this is a very difficult video to talk about, not only how some might think that it's crazy talk, but this, as a descriptive particular species, can really mess with someone's life. So I'm making this video with absolute respect for this particular species. Now, this individual, I'm going to talk a little bit about this person, and what I've done was I've cropped out particular information and so forth, because I don't have the permission of this individual or anyone else who was assisting, for example, or trying to assist online as this discussion was playing out. But I'm going to describe this individual so you have an idea who this individual was, and I'm just going to very briefly just mention how we started talking. So there was one evening, I remember, there was some online chat, nothing to do with this forum, and you're talking to people all around the world about all sorts of stuff, and I just thought, why not just get in these little chat groups, and I think they had like subtopics or something. I can't remember all the details because I don't think I was part of this for very long, but and you just go off, and there's different, like, there's a main room and these other little side rooms, and people would just go in, and if they had something specific they wanted to talk about. So one evening I was just sitting, and there was a lady who was in this chat just talking, and we ended up just kind of communicating back and forth in this room. There was other people there as well, and you were able to go off onto like a private room. So if you just want to, talk something personal, I guess, whatever. And we ended up, her and I, just talking. And long story short, I think she had asked me, so what are you up to? I said, oh, I'm just sitting in this small parking lot. There's a little strip mall behind me, and there's a Tim Hortons in front of me across the road, and just having a tea and whatever. And it's like, okay, that's kind of cool. And then kind of quickly, I can't remember how or why, but I ended up, saying, yeah, this where I'm sitting, there was a nickname for this little parking lot in the strip mall. It's the name of this convenience store, so we had a nickname for it. So I just kind of brought that up, and she's like, wait a second, like, I know that. And as it turned out, she had lived in a building that I had lived in after I came back from living in Europe, and the whole story with the woman that I married and everything else. But she was living, I think, on the floor above or below. And it was like, no way. And that building was literally behind me. So, we were just kind of, okay. So she had actually come out to the parking lot, came to my window, and said hello. And she stood outside, because, I don't know who she is. We don't know. He's like, okay, who's crazy here? No pun intended with this story that's coming. So we just, talked, and then that was it. And then we exchanged numbers, and we would meet to have smoke every so often and whatever. And to describe this person, when you say look at a photo, or just superficially, this person was always really happy, smiling, pleasant. This person was always pleasant. But there was always something behind that. There was something more somber, more serious. I'm going to use it as a very loose descriptive, unhappy, but that's not accurate. So I had one evening I said, do you want to meet up outside of the building and just have a quick chat? And and this is where this story begins. So as we were sitting in my vehicle at the time, she was sitting in the passenger seat, and we were having a smoke. I had my window down, and there was the wall of the building, the side of the building was in front of us. So I, just kind of looking off to the side, talking and looking back at each other, and she's doing the same thing on her side. Her windows were down and whatnot. And then at one moment, I had looked at her, and I noticed her eyes had changed. They were like really dark, bright yellow with slits. But wait, there's more. And so I looked, and she's talking, and I'm looking, and the eyes were looking at me, and I turned my head and I looked back out my window and just trying to think, what did I just see? And I looked back, and it was still there, but this time it was around the eyes. had changed as well. And I don't know how many times I looked away and looked back, and I was more surprised. I wasn't scared or anything. I was just like surprised. It took me off guard. And when I had looked back the last time or two, most of the face had changed, but it wasn't static, and it wasn't the whole face. It was like fluid, like the edges were fluid, kind of moving, if I'm making any sense. But what I had seen with the face was what some would call like reptilian, and it had like the mouth, the nose, the eyes, like the whole face, like if you drew a fluid circle that wasn't static. And the colors were beautiful. There were kind of like on a hot summer day, if there's say engine oil, a little puddle of engine oil on the ground, you have those vibrant greens and blues, and those kind of like those colors, very beautiful colors. And I looked, but this time I had looked a little bit longer than just glancing over, and I had looked out the driver window, and then she said, what's the matter? And I said, oh, nothing. And she goes, did you see it? And in my mind, I'm thinking, she knows something about what I just seen. But, and I said, well, I kept looking out of my driver window, and she said, you seen it, didn't you? And I'm kind of pretending to look, like seen what, because you know what I'm talking about. And I just kind of looked at her. Now, by this time, her face was back to normal. And I didn't say anything, I don't think. And she said, you seen my eyes change? And I looked at her, kept a poker face, which is something I do very well. For example, one of the reasons why the time that I worked for Ministry of Correctional Services, dealing with sex offenders and child molesters and stuff, they chose me because I was able to keep a poker face. I didn't let things show that it bothered me. And she had said something else, and I said, it was more than your eyes. And she got surprised. She said, what do you mean? And I said, it started with the eyes, but the whole face, and explained to her what I just explained here in this video. And she was just, wow, like no one's ever said that in her life. They've only seen her eyes change, not her face. Now, I was going to pause here for a moment. During the times that we were talking online prior to all this, she would ask me, what do I know about this particular species? Because, people would talk about all sorts of stuff, and this is like when we were in the main chat group, and people just started bringing stuff up, and what do I think about what people call shapeshifters, which I'm going to address as well shortly. And I said, well, I heard about it. At the time, I personally never experienced it, so I really don't have much to say. I've heard about it and whatever. I've experienced a lot of different things at that time, not that particular thing, so this would have been my first time. And so after she said, you seen it, and I said it was more than everything else, I said, is this why you're asking me what do I know about this? And she goes, yeah, I think so. So why were you asking me? Like, there's other people But, when you want to address something specifically, you'd say their name, and, just like you would in a room full of people. Because I don't know. And we talked a little bit, and then it's like, okay, we'll call it a night. And then all I'm going to say at this point is the week that followed was unusual. Had some weird things, but anyway, perhaps that's a different story. And we still talked, mostly on the phone. And I was saying, there's this forum that talks about all sorts of stuff. They even talked about free men on the land type of things. And I remember talking with different people about this and challenging them and kind of going along with them because for some reason, a lot of paranoia with some people. But anyway, so I said, well, how about I introduce you to this group and see if there's anything useful that comes from that. Which I did. I had made a post and said, I titled it with Shapeshifter because that's something that at the time, and perhaps even now, people can relate to because everyone's heard about this. And I did an introduction about this experience and tried to explain some things. And I told everyone not to post anything until I introduce this individual to the group. Like this person comes in and posts their comment, which they did eventually. And people were, coming and started to give their input. And I got to stop here for a moment because a lot of people, I've said for years how people make conclusions based on their limited knowledge bases, and a lot of that has to also do, for example, with belief systems, religions, and perhaps even sciences or pseudosciences, whatever. And by the end of it all, she became very frustrated and just stopped replying to people and thanking people for what they thought was an answer or whatever. I just want to say that this is not coming down on people for giving their input. People do the best they can. You can't come down on someone for having a limited knowledge base, say lack of experience, or they might have what they think is an experience or whatever, or research, keyboard warriors and so forth. But it doesn't help when someone or people or whatever are trying to perhaps find an answer or something. So it doesn't help when you're getting bombarded with all this other stuff, and mostly people's opinions, theories, beliefs, and wants, personal fictions. So yeah, she just stopped coming, and I don't know, it was like, I can't remember, maybe 6 months later, I just said, yeah, I don't think she's going to be coming back here, and thanked everyone. And so that's basically my story on this particular topic, on this particular species. During that time, I tried to explain to people that this species, they're not shapeshifters. They don't shapeshift physically. What they do is they project into someone. And using childhood descriptives, I would say that most people are what I call empty shells. And most people don't want to accept that. because either of a belief system, religion, or something or other. But most people are empty shells, and I've said that since I remember as a young child. And that's why I use those descriptives as well as the descriptives of the nice ones and the not so nice ones, which I mentioned in a previous video. So I wanted to show that watching this latest video, for example, with demon vision or whatever this thing was called, inspired by this YouTuber's video, I want to show, not only say that, yeah, you know, oh, I've experienced these things or something similar or whatever. I want to prove that this is not something that I'm just saying now. I said this before, and in my really old videos, I briefly somewhat mention what I've just shared here. This is the first time I'm really sharing this. Well, this is the first time I'm sharing this publicly. I've shared this over the years with a handful of people, and so to share this now is a little bit more detailed, is a little bit more difficult. But what I did talk about in my really old videos was more about this particular species, trying to explain what people think's going on. And what I found interesting was when people talk about these things, they talk about, oh, you know, they seen them and they're ugly and they're scary and you know, green, just talking about like pastel, deep green, and you know, just like you would say, you know, some sort of reptile here. And people forget that there are others who can read them. That's all I'm going to say to that. A lot of times people are convinced that they had an experience or whatever it is, and the studies made famous by Julia Shaw gives insight to this. But there are some people who will actually experience something. So going back to the woman who freaked out on the plane and other stories around that time, as I said, apparently these stories continue. That's why I was interested, like, she's seen something. And a lot of people are trying to attribute all this as some sort of modern technology like CERN and all this other nonsense, completely omitting the fact that this type of stuff has been talked about as a descriptive since the beginning, long before this technology has been around. And then, you know, people start doing mental gymnastics trying to make it work, and just like, you just have to give up with most people because they don't want to listen. That's a big problem in this world today, is people don't want to listen. They assume that everyone's equal. They may have some insight because they read it on the internet or seen a video or something, or believe, which is to make an uninformed conclusion, that they had an experience and everything else. But you just have to kind of, okay, whatever. Most times I just ignore people's stories, and I'm not one to be interested really listening to other people's stories, or especially their comments to a story that's being presented, because there's just no point. You can't get through to these people. So anyway, that's what I really just wanted to share, was this particular experience with this particular species. And as I said in the beginning, I do so with absolute respect to them. And I don't know what more I can say. You can accept what I'm saying or not. I really don't care. And you can think whatever it is you want of me. I really don't care. As I've said before, I've had a lifetime of woo-woo and some may call spiritual events in my life. They're two different things, for clarity. going all the way back to my childhood. And people who've known me for a long time think that because of my death experiences and so forth, maybe this has something to do with it. Some people even said, well, maybe it's my bloodline, going back to ancient Sumer. Maybe a combination of both. I have no idea. All I can do is share what I know. I don't know everything, but what I do know, I know. And that's that. But these experiences, there's as I used to call it, a buffet table of experiences, which, dare I say, include abduction experiences as well. And perhaps, maybe, if there's interest, I'll do a video talking about that. Take what you will from this. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
That warm, white, prickly light was the same warm, prickly light that time you and I were. Remember when that light showed up above the house?
And I suddenly see all this fire crackling, like going, to the hydro lines.
Well, what you and I seen was a strobe-looking light.
Yeah. I remember something about losing time, but I don't know anything.
We lost time.
But I don't know anything before and after.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me all the time, when is it going to get easier? When you die.